Okay, let's start with some meditation. Close your eyes and watch your breath. Watch the breath coming in, watch the breath going out. And think thoughts of goodwill. Goodwill is a wish for true happiness. And because true happiness comes from within, your true happiness doesn't have to conflict with anyone else's. So start with thoughts of goodwill for yourself. Tell yourself, may I be happy. May I understand the causes for true happiness and be able to act on them. And then extend that same thought to others. People who are close to your heart, your family, your very close friends. May they find true happiness too. And then spread that thought out in ever-widening circles to people you know well and like, to people you like even though you don't know them so well, to people you're more neutral about, to people you don't like, to people you don't even know. And not just people, living beings of all kinds. East, west, north, south, above and below, out to infinity. May we all find true happiness in our hearts. And now bring your attention back to the breath. Try a couple of good, long, deep in and out breaths to notice where you feel this process of breathing in the body. Allow your attention to settle there, and then the next question is it comfortable? If the breath, long breathing is comfortable, keep it up. If not, you can change. You can make it shorter, more shallow, or in long, out short, in short, out long, heavy, light, fast, slow. See what rhythm or texture of breathing feels best for the body right now. If your mind wanders off, just drop whatever thought it is and you'll be right back at the breath. As for all the noises outside, think of your body being like a screen on a window. The wind comes through the screen doesn't catch the wind, and so the screen is not disturbed by the wind. Just let the sounds go through. You try to keep your awareness right here with the sensation of breathing in the body. If there are any pains in the body, don't pay them any attention. Focus instead on the parts of the body that you can make comfortable by the way you breathe. Now, as the breath gets comfortable, you may have a problem where you start focusing on the sense of comfort instead of the breath, in which case you lose the foundation for your concentration. So to counteract that tendency, the next step is to breathe in and out aware of the entire body. And a good way to build up to that whole body awareness is to go through the body section by section. Start down around the navel, the area in the abdomen. Locate that part of the body in your awareness. Watch it for a while as you breathe in and breathe out. And if you feel any sense of tension or tightness in that part of the body, allow it to relax. So no new tension builds up as you breathe in, and you don't hold on to any tension as you breathe out. Now bring your attention up to the middle of the chest and follow the same steps there. In other words, 1, locate that part of the body in your awareness. 2, watch it for a while as you breathe in and breathe out to see what rhythm of breathing feels good there. And then 3, if there's any sense of tension or tightness in that part of the body, allow it to relax. Then bring your attention up to the middle of the head. And think of the breath energy entering the head not only through the nose, but also through the eyes and the ears. In from the back of the head, down from the top of the head, going deep into the brain. And then as you breathe out, think of it radiating out from the head in all directions. Now bring your attention to the back of the neck. As you breathe in, think of the breath energy entering there from the back and going down through the shoulders and the arms, out to the tips of the fingers. And as you breathe out, think of it radiating out from all those parts of the body into the air. Now keeping your attention focused at the back of the neck. As you breathe in, think of the breath energy entering there and now going down both sides of the spine, down through the legs, out to the tips of the toes. And as you breathe out, think of it radiating out from all those parts of the body into the air. Now that completes one quick cycle in the survey of the body. If you were meditating on your own, you could go through the body section by section, smaller sections at whatever pace you liked. But for the time being, choose any one spot in the body where it seems most congenial to focus your attention. Allow your attention to settle there, and then from that spot to spread out to fill the entire body. So you're aware of the whole body breathing in, the whole body breathing out. The range of your awareness may have a tendency to shrink, especially on the out-breath. So each time you breathe in, remind yourself, whole body. Each time you breathe out, whole body. Allow the breath to find whatever rhythm feels best. Your main responsibility right now is to try to maintain this sense of centered but broad awareness. It's healing for the body, healing for the mind. And because it's centered and all around, it provides a good foundation for insight to arise. But for the time being, don't worry about the insights, just try to make sure the foundation is strong. Now, before you leave meditation, think thoughts of goodwill once more. Think of whatever sense of peace or well-being you felt for the past session, and dedicate it to others, either specific people you know are suffering right now, or to all living beings in all directions. May we all find peace and well-being in our hearts. And with that thought, you can open your eyes. Okay. You sometimes hear of people listening to a Dharma talk and gaining awakening. And I don't know if that's going to happen tonight. Part of the responsibility is mine, and part of the responsibility is yours. The speaker's responsibility is to be a person of integrity and to teach the true Dharma. And the listener has to bring 3 qualities to listening. And so for tonight and tomorrow night, I'd like to talk about 2 of those qualities. The third quality is one we practiced just now, which is you try to bring your mind gathered into one to listen to the talk. Focus on what's actually being said. Don't let your thoughts wander around someplace else. And the other 2 qualities are appropriate attention and practicing the Dharma in accordance with the Dharma. So tonight's talk will be about appropriate attention. Tomorrow night we'll talk about practicing the Dharma in accordance with the Dharma. Appropriate attention basically means asking the right questions while you're listening to the talk. And particularly they have to do with questions about what is skillful, what is not skillful, how to develop what is skillful, how to abandon what is unskillful in your own mind. And this also extends to the duties of the Four Noble Truths. In other words, the truth of suffering is something you want to comprehend. So the question is, how do I comprehend my own suffering in light of what's being said? The cause of suffering is something you want to abandon. The cessation is something you want to realize, and the path to the cessation is something you want to develop. So you've got 4 different duties that you might follow as you're listening to the talk and as you carry the message of the talk into your daily life. Now, sometimes we hear that when you listen to a talk, all you have to do is learn how to accept, and let go, let go, let go. But here the appropriate attention is actually saying you have more duties than that, and you have to learn how to distinguish what is appropriate for what's going on in your mind right now. Apply that knowledge as you're listening. Now, the idea of simply accepting is very attractive. It doesn't require too much thought. Doesn't ask too much of you. You just say, just be okay with whatever comes up. And there's a certain amount of appeal there. But also there's the problem that sometimes people say, well, I don't want to make an effort in my practice. I've tried making an effort in the past and it didn't work, and I find it's much easier and much more comfortable just not to make any effort at all, just to learn how to accept things, whatever's coming up in my mind, accept it as it is, not do anything about it. The Buddha gives an analogy, however. He said it's like trying to get milk out of a cow. And if you twist the horn, you don't get any milk, right? If you twist really strongly and with a lot of effort, you still don't get any milk, and the cow will probably kick you. And then you stop twisting the horn and you say, I feel much better not twisting the horn. It's easier on the cow, it's easier on me. And that's true, it is easier than twisting the horn, but you still don't get any milk. The purpose of engaging with a cow is to get milk out of the cow. And that's going to require an effort. It simply requires the right effort. In other words, you don't twist the horn, you pull the udder. You pull the udder, it doesn't require that much effort, but you get the milk. And so simply accepting is basically saying, okay, I'm not going to twist the horn anymore, I'll stop making any effort, I'll be okay. You can be relaxed, but you're missing out on the opportunity to get the milk. So you've got to bear that in mind. When that state of mind that says, I feel much better not putting any effort in, it's much easier just accepting the way things are, you're still not getting the most out of the Dharma. There's also a phenomenon that I've noticed. There are certain meditation methods that actually train you that you can't have any choices in the present moment, that you simply have to accept. And the more you engage in those kind of meditations, you develop a quality that the psychologists call learned helplessness. I don't know if you've heard of this, where you learn basically, I can't do anything, I might as well just give up. They did an experiment with some dogs one time. They put dogs in a room, it was a metal floor with bands of metal running through it, and they would give them electric shocks. And the dogs discovered that no matter where they sat down in the room, they were going to get shocks. So after a while then they moved the dogs to a second room. And in the second room, half the room, if they lay down there, they would still get electric shocks. But on the other half of the room, there would be no shocks. And so they put the dogs in the room, and the dogs just lay there. And even the side that were getting the shocks, they would take the dogs and they would pull them off from that side and put them on the other side to show them that there was a difference. But the dogs by that time had given up. So wherever they were, they just let the shocks go through them. So this is learned helplessness. And when you finally decide, after long practice of accepting or noting, not making any difference, you develop this quality of learned helplessness. There are opportunities to escape from suffering, but you don't take them because you've absorbed the message that you can't do anything about it. Now this is not what the Buddha is teaching. The Buddha is teaching there is an end to suffering, and you do have choices. Several years ago, I was watching a French TV show where they were interviewing a Buddhist teacher. And the teacher was saying the whole message of the Buddha is that you just simply learn how to accept things as they are, that you can't do anything to make any changes, and you learn to be okay with that. And the interviewer was saying, this doesn't sound right. Isn't this defeatist and pessimistic? And the teacher said, only if you think about it. Now, the Buddha was not the type of person to tell you not to think. You actually do have to think that there are differences between what you do and the results you're going to get, and you're going to have some power in terms of suffering or not suffering. Last May, I was in France teaching, and I was waiting in front of the hotel. I was going to be taken to a Vipassana group to give a talk. And I suddenly realized that I was standing on the sidewalk. This was my first time after having been in France for a couple of weeks where I did not have a translator. I was exposed. So what if someone comes up and asks me something in French? I can speak a little bit of French, but it's pretty poor. And sure enough, there were some telephone workers working on the other side of the street. And one of them saw me, and he came over. He said, marvelous, you're just the person I'm looking for. Does Buddhism make you happy? I said, yeah. He said, how does it do that? I said, we have to learn how to be generous and learn how to be virtuous and learn how to meditate. How do you meditate? He said, well, we have a website. And it has information in French. So I gave him the address. Because he had complained. He said, I need something. Because I have this miserable job and I'm surrounded by dishonest people. I need something to find happiness. And so I struggled through with my French and got out of there. And then I was picked up, went to give the talk. And the topic of the talk I was going to give that night was how the present moment is not the goal. We're not here just to arrive in the present moment and be okay. And so I told them the story about the telephone worker. I said, if I had told him, learn to be okay with your miserable job, learn to be okay with your dishonest friends, he would have walked away. And he would have been right to do that. That message would not have been all that helpful. I mean, basically the message that says that there's nothing you can do, you just have to learn how to accept things. This makes life meaningless. Because meaning in life comes from the fact that we believe that we have choices. We can establish goals, we can choose our goals, we can choose the way we're going to try to find those goals. And the way we act, we do have some control over what is going to happen in our lives. And if we didn't have that sense of choice and goals and a sense of control, life would be meaningless. We would just be machines and just running along as the machine was programmed and then stop. And the way the Buddha analyzes the mind, he actually affirms that yes, we do have choices. This is the whole principle of karma. You can choose one action over another, and choice is real. Now, there may be some influences coming in from the past, from your past karma, but your present karma is free. You are free to choose how to respond to any situation. In fact, you are shaping each situation with your present input. And you're free to choose to do this skillfully or unskillfully. So we do have these choices. Secondly, as the Buddha said, our awareness of the world is shaped by the process of fabrication. The Pali word is sankhara. And he said all fabrications are done for the sake of something. In other words, they're strategies that we're aiming at a goal. They're based on desire. We want happiness. And so we figure out what's going to give us the best, most happiness, and we can take that as our goal, and then we can strategize and find our way through that. That's what the process of fabrication is all about. And we do have some control. We can learn how to develop skills around this. This is the reason that suffering, the reason desire causes suffering is because it's done in ignorance. Fabrication causes suffering when it's done in ignorance. But it doesn't have to be done in ignorance. If we bring knowledge to these processes, we can actually use the process of fabrication to come to the end of suffering. So the Buddha was not saying, just accept things as they are. It's more, accept the fact that you are responsible and that you can learn. And this is what the teachings are all about, that we can learn from our actions. And the Buddha, of course, gives these teachings so we can get a better sense of what possibilities are open to us. This is what the Four Noble Truths are all about. And truth number 3, the end of suffering is something that is possible. Truth number 4, there is a path of practice. You can practice in such a way that you can get to that end. So the whole purpose of these Four Noble Truths is to expand your sense of what you can do. Otherwise, if you have a very narrow sense of what you can do, your choices are going to be very limited and end up very unskillful. There's a story that the Buddha tells, not the Buddha, but there's a story, it's in the Pali Canon, where one of the Buddha's disciples tells about 2 men who go to a village. The village was deserted, there was an epidemic that went through, people were dying, and so everybody left the village very quickly, and they left all their belongings behind. And so the 2 men decide after a while, okay, the disease has probably calmed down. Let's go in and check out and see if there's anything we can gather up from what was left behind. And so they go in and they find some flax. Flax is the plant that they use to make linen. And say, okay, let's take some flax. And so they bind it up, carry it on their shoulders. And they come along and they find some linen thread. And the first man says, this is why we got the flax to begin with. We wanted linen thread. So let's put the flax down and take the linen thread. And the second man says, no, I put a lot of effort into binding up my flax. I think I'll stick with the flax. So the first man gets the linen thread, the second man goes with his flax. They come along, they find some linen cloth. And the first man says, well, this is why we got the linen thread, was to get linen cloth. Let's drop your flax, let's take linen cloth. And the second man says, no, I put a lot of effort into binding up this flax. I think I'm going to carry the flax around. So they go along and they find some copper. And they say, copper is much more valuable than the linen cloth. Let's forget about the linen cloth, forget about the flax, let's get the copper. The second man says, no, I really put a lot of effort into binding up this flax. I'll just stick with the flax. And so from there they find silver, they find gold. And the first man says, look, gold, this is why we got this stupid flax to begin with. Let's take the gold. And the other man says, no, I ain't like this flax. And so you can imagine when they get home, whose relatives were happy, whose relatives are not so happy. what it comes down to is realizing you have choices, you have some options, and it's up to you to take the advantage of these options. So the Four Noble Truths are there basically to teach you, you can develop skills that will lead to a goal. Because when you're listening to the Dharma, this is what it's all about, is you're leading to a goal. In Pali, they have a term, atta, A-T-T-H-A, which is not atta, or self, but A-T-T-H-A, which means goal and also means meaning. Like the meaning of a word is its atta, but also the goal of the practice is also atta. And these two things are paired with the Dharma. And if you want to understand the Dharma, you have to know what its atta is. Where is this aiming? This is aiming to the end of suffering. It's basically saying it is possible to have a goal, and it is possible to have meaning in life by choosing the end of suffering as your meaning. And the universe itself is meaningless. It just goes around and around and around. You've been through it many, many times. As the Buddha said, you see someone who's very poor, you've been there before. No need to look down on that person. You see someone who's very rich and powerful, you've been there before too. No need to be jealous. Ajahn Fuang used to say that if there's a sensual pleasure that you really crave, remind yourself, you've had this in the past. It's nothing new. When you think about that a little bit, you say, well, if I get it again, I'm going to lose it again, I'm going to miss it again, crave it again, try to get it again. It just goes around and around and around. The universe on its own is meaningless. It does not have an atta. The Dharma, though, has an atta. Saying, we can show you, give meaning to your life by deciding, I really do want to put an end to suffering. It is possible. And I'll do what I can in order to do that. This is what the purpose of the Four Noble Truths is, to open your mind to that possibility. So if you really want to understand the Dharma, you, one, have to realize it is aimed at putting in an effort to arrive at this goal. And when you arrive at the goal, that's when you really understand what the Dharma is. Up to that point, it's not all that clear. You say, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. You may have some conviction, but what you really want is knowledge. There's another story that the Buddha tells about, started out with a man going to visit the Buddha. And after listening to the Buddha, he's very impressed. He comes back home and tells his friend, that Buddha, he's really awakened. And the friend says, well, how do you know? And the other one said, it's like being an elephant hunter going into the forest. You see the footprints of a big footprints. These have to be the footprints of a big male elephant. And I saw the Buddha talking with other people. People would come in order to defeat him in argument, and even before they opened their mouths, he converted them to his teaching. He's awakened. So the other man says, I'd really like to meet this Buddha someday. And so the second man has a chance to see the Buddha, and he tells him what the first man said. And the Buddha says, that's not the correct use of that elephant foot simile. Do you want to know what the correct use is? A skilled elephant hunter goes into the forest. He's looking for a big bull elephant because he needs a big bull elephant to do heavy work. He comes along across some big footprints, but he doesn't jump to the conclusion that these must be the footprints of a big bull elephant. Why is that? Because there are dwarf females with big feet. But they look likely, so he follows them. And he finds some scratch marks up in the trees. But again, he doesn't come to the conclusion that these must be the scratch marks of the tusks of a big bull elephant. Why is that? Because there are tall females with tusks. Maybe it's theirs. But they look likely, so he follows them along. Finally, he comes to a clearing and sees, oh, there's the big bull elephant. That's when he knows for sure he's got the bull elephant. In the same way, you really don't know the Dharma is true. Even if you practice jhana, get the mind into strong states of concentration, he says, those are like footprints. Even if you get psychic powers, those are like scratch marks. It's when you see the deathless from the practice, now that's when you know for sure the Buddha's awakened. Because at that point you've had your first taste of awakening too. So that's when you really get to know what the Dharma is all about, when you finally reach the goal. That's when you understand its meaning and purpose. Up until that point, you go on faith. But it's the kind of faith that the Buddha's not asking you to believe in anything impossible or unreasonable. He's asking you to believe in the power of your actions, that you do have choices, you can establish goals for yourself, and you can pursue those goals and arrive at an end of suffering. Things that are worth having conviction in. So this, of course, requires a fair amount of discernment. As I said, when you listen to the Dharma, you have to figure out, okay, which truth am I experiencing right now? Am I experiencing the truth of suffering? How do I comprehend that? Because suffering is not something you simply receive, it's something you're actively doing, you're clinging. How do I see myself clinging? How do I see myself create suffering for myself where I don't have to? That's what it means to comprehend it. When you see the cause, when you see what the suffering is, how do I find out what the cause is so I can let it go? Most of the time we don't make the proper distinction. We see suffering, we try to let it go, push it away. It's like going into your house. The house is filled with smoke, and you spend all your time trying to put out the smoke. You're never going to get to an end because the fire is still burning. You've got to find the fire. When you put out the fire, the smoke will end on its own. In the same way, you have to find the cause. When you abandon the cause, that's the end of the suffering. So you have to learn how to figure this out. What am I experiencing around here? Is this something I have to comprehend, or is this something I can abandon? And then with the path, what do I have to do in order to develop it? So it's a very proactive path, which fits in the fact that, as I said, the mind is proactive. It's constantly fabricating things. And what we're trying to do is fabricate a path that leads to the end of suffering, instead of continuing to fabricate suffering. Now the question is, how about the qualities of equanimity, contentment, and patience? How do these fit into the path? Okay, they fit into the path in the sense that you learn when to be proactive, when to step back. Equanimity is not the goal. Equanimity is not a virtue in and of itself. When the Buddha taught equanimity, he taught it in the context of the four Brahmaviharas, which include goodwill, compassion, empathetic joy. So you don't just do equanimity all the time. What you're trying to develop is the equanimity of a good doctor. Now the good doctor has compassion and goodwill for the patient. If there's anything the doctor can do, the doctor will try to help. But there will come points where the doctor says, okay, I can't help here. Now if the doctor lets himself or herself get upset by this, then the doctor is not going to be effective in the areas where he or she can make a difference. And so you have to learn how to be equanimous selectively. Be equanimous about the things you can't change, so you can focus on the things that you can. Otherwise, you'd be like a doctor. You go to the office and you tell the doctor, look, I've got this horrible pain in my side. And he says, accept it. You'd go and find a new doctor, So you're not just developing equanimity all the time. You're going to learn how to be equanimous about the things that you can't change, so you can focus on the things that you can. Similarly, when you're developing patience and endurance, okay, you don't just accept and put up with things. The Buddha recommends the endurance of a soldier. The soldier has to learn how to endure things. The soldier has to learn how to be patient when there are setbacks. Not just simply to be defeated, but for the purpose of figuring out, okay, how can I get around these difficulties? How can I not be thrown off course by this, so I can continue fighting and find a better way around the difficulties? So you're patient with the things that you have to put up with, but at the same time you're still looking for a way to get beyond them. The same thing goes with contentment. We learn how to be content with external surroundings as we experience in them, in terms of our food, clothing, shelter, those kinds of things. But we're not content with any unskillful qualities in the mind. Those are things that we have to learn how to get rid of, learn how to abandon. And the Buddha says, if you want to be mindful about unskillful qualities in the mind, you're mindful like in the same way as a person who's trying to whose head is on fire and is trying to put out the fire. So this kind of mindfulness does not just look at the flames, see the color of the flames, appreciate the flames. Your mindfulness is telling you, put the fire out. And so you practice what the Buddha says, lack of contentment with unskillful qualities, and even you are not content with the level of your skill until you put an end to suffering. Okay, that's where your discontent gets focused. As for contentment, You don't let yourself get worked up over the fact that your food may not be the best food, or your clothing may not be the best clothing, your shelter may not be the best shelter. Those things don't matter. What really matters is the state of your mind. I mean, it doesn't make any difference if you die well-dressed, if your mind is in bad shape. So you work on your mind, you practice discontent with the mind, you practice compassion for areas where you can change things, you are determined to come out victorious in this path. And that's the proper use of equanimity, contentment, and patience, so that you don't get knocked off course. So when you're listening to a Dharma talk, you're not just being asked to just accept. You're being asked to learn how to question. What in this talk helps me comprehend my suffering? What in this talk will help me to abandon the cause of my suffering? What in this talk will help me in the development of the path to the end of suffering? If you bring those questions as you're listening to the Dharma, then you're going to benefit the most from the Dharma. So that's your responsibility as you're listening. So, do you have any questions? Still pretty short. Question in the back. Questions in the back. Do we have a traveling mic?
I think we only have one mic here. Perhaps you could stand up and speak up loud, starting from the front row. Yeah, go ahead.
If you can, I don't think that past me.
I'm a bit excited to talk. A certain question about my recent past experiences. So actually I was diligent practicing a couple of years before. I also was ordained in Thailand shortly. But in the past year I experienced a couple of setbacks, and especially in approaching with such experiences, mostly people non-Buddhist told me, like, as a Buddhist you should not behave like that, or it's like this, so something like this. So it made it quite difficult actually, because I'm very Thai, also Thai tradition. I'm living with Thai people 20 years already, and so usually in Thailand if you have a problem you run away, so it's also specifically not a good way to deal with that. But it made me very feel, in this, having these setbacks, it made me, in regarding to what Prajahn just said, it made myself very hard to discern and to make my own decision what is good. Should I rather take a decision for my own, so for living secure in a secure place, or should I really act towards that person who telling me these critics? I don't know if it's so clear now what I said.
Okay. You're going to learn what's skillful and what's not skillful by experimenting. And so you ask yourself, okay, when I get into a situation where I'm going to say something or do something, what is my intention? And if the intention is that you think it's going to harm anybody, you don't do it. If you think it's going to harm anybody, you don't do it. If you don't see any harm, you say, let's give it a try. And then when you follow through with it, watch the results. And then if it's harmful while you're doing it, stop. And otherwise carry through. And then when you're done, look back. What were the long-term results? Mm-hmm. Okay, you're not here just to make everybody calm and comfortable. I mean, harming somebody basically means getting them to do something unskillful. Okay, you don't do that, okay. Sometimes people will get upset, but you can't be responsible for their emotions. Okay. Otherwise, people's emotions are going to run your life. Okay. Yeah, okay. So you can say, okay, as long as I'm not intending to harm anybody, the action was okay. Now, try to be a little bit more skillful in deciding when you're willing to say something uncomfortable and when it's best to say something that's more pleasing. That's when you're going to learn this through experience. There's no hard and fast rule. But in this way, as you learn how to observe, you become a better and better observer of what's skillful and what's not. It's going to take time. Okay. Question?
Okay, we'll go by the rows. There's one question here, then we'll pass the mic to the next row.
Good evening, Bhante. May I know, is appropriate attention, yoniso manisakara, the same as mindfulness, sati?
No. Appropriate attention, as I said, is the questions you ask yourself. And there are some questions that are not appropriate, other questions are appropriate. And you basically look for questions that are framed in terms of the Four Noble Truths. Now, sati, mindfulness, basically means to keep something in mind. And if you're going to be right mindfulness, okay, then you try to keep the body in and of itself in mind, or feelings, and you're trying to be mindful, alert, and ardent. In other words, alert means watching what you're doing, mindful means trying to remember what you should be doing, and then ardent means basically trying to do it. And then seeing what results come back, and then learn from that. So the process, attention is basically the question of which questions should I attend to, which questions should I not attend to. Whereas mindfulness is more kind of trying to instruct your mind, so basically to get the mind into concentration. And also as you're going through life, to remember what I should be doing, what I should not be doing. So they're two different things.
Okay, there's another one here.
I have a question regarding meditation. So you were talking about proactive in the practice. So recently my meditation, I realized that when I'm aware of the kilesas, if I don't, do anything about it, I'll just be aware, the kilesas get stronger and stronger. But when I realize that when I try to relax, because I realize that when the kilesas arise, the body gets tense up a bit. And when I relax, the kilesas slowly gets weaker and weaker. And as I keep on doing that, experimenting here and there, I realize as I'm relaxed more, the kilesas is gone. And then I bring it back to my breath or putto. Am I doing it right, and should I continue doing it?
Yeah, what you're doing, it's called a process called bodily fabrication, where you relax the breath energy in the body. And that's one way of dealing with your defilements. Now, it's not going to work all the time. It's like that story about the cannons that the British set, during World War II. They put them on Sentosa thinking the Japanese were going to come from that direction. And the Japanese came, from woodlands, And so if you start just saying, okay, whatever my glaciers come up, I'm just going to relax. The glaciers say, ha, 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 we're going to get around you. So use it when it's helpful, but also realize you're going to learn how to reason with your defilements too. And that's what verbal fabrication and mental fabrication are. The images that you hold in mind, that's mental fabrication. The way you talk to yourself about them, that's verbal fabrication. You're going to need to use all three. But learning how to relax around it is, it's a good step in the right direction.
Second row, anyone wants the mic? We'll pass it down. No? Okay, third row, anyone? Just pass the mic down. Perhaps raise your hand. I thought I saw someone raise their hand behind.
There were hands before. Where'd they all go?
Yes. Okay. Can pass the mic back.
Yeah, thanks, Ajahn, for your teachings. What I believe is that the Buddha taught about the tathata, the suchness of things. So, in relation to your acceptance of things, I believe we have to accept what is, meaning that the suchness of things, and not argue with what is. That is basically what we mean by acceptance. So, just like, for example, if it was raining just now, if I keep arguing with why should it rain, why is it rain, I'm going to come to the top. It's not going to get you anywhere. So, we accept that it's raining, let's see what we can do. Come here. So how is that different from not accepting the non-acceptance they are talking of the tathata?
Okay, well, you can't do anything much about the rain, right?
Yes.
Okay. If a defilement comes up in your mind, you should be able to do something about it. I mean, when you accept the fact that it's there, but you realize, okay, I'm helping to create this and I don't need to, and why should I do it? When the Buddha talks about suchness, he's talking about the quality of the mind of an arahant, someone who's been totally trained. I mean, there does come a point where everything gets let go at the end of the path. But you don't let things go until you get to the other side. It's like that raft, the image of the raft going across the river. You hold on to the raft as you go across, and then you let go when you get to the other side. So the suchness of the Arahant is the point, okay, when you just accept, okay, now that the path has been fully developed, all I have to do is just let it go. But you don't let it go before it's done. You have to do your work to put it together. If you don't, and not just hold on while you go across, but you also have to put it together on this shore. It's important to realize with this image of the raft, the Buddha is not saying there's going to be a nirvana yacht that's going to come over and pick you up and take you back. You've got to take what you've got and put it together and make it into a raft and then hold on. So you accept the fact that the river is there, you accept the fact that the trees are there, but you make a raft out of the trees and the vines, and you hold on and you swim.
Thank you.
That's the distinction.
Thank you, Bhante. My question is something concerning the popularization of Dhamma and how to put Dhamma into context. It seems that every year there are many books that try to teach the Dhamma to lay people, and they put it in several different contexts that we are familiar with, such as if the Buddha married, the Buddha at work, happiness at work. Now, some of these things may be skillful, may not be so much applied to our context, or may not be so skillful. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is that given our situation, if we go directly to the canon and read, we may not be able to apply it to our own situation. That's why we rely on these popular books, so-called. So another thing is, if we go to a teacher, the teacher may not then understand the full context of our situation. And the principle, the problem with all these cases is that we have to learn how to get the feedback from all these sources and apply it directly to our own self, our own context. So can you please comment on how we are supposed to do this? Thank you.
Well, when the Buddha talks about learning how to get the most out of listening to the Dharma, he said the first thing you want to do is find a person of integrity. Now, looking at a book, you cannot tell whether the author is a person of integrity or not. This is why it's good to be able to find some teachers that you meet in person and you get to get a sense of them. Is this somebody that I can trust and someone I can't trust? It's also good to realize, okay, there's a process that I call the romanticizing of Buddhism. And it's good to read up on that. There's a book called Buddhist Romanticism. It talks about the ways in which the Dharma has been changed as it comes into the modern society. And that gives a comparison between, okay, this is what the Buddha taught, this is what popularization is. So you begin to gain a sense of where the popularization begins to go off. And when you have that kind of background, then you can read other books and listen to other teachers and get a sense, okay, this person is going in line, this person is going away. That's the best advice I can give. The other piece of advice is move to Valley Center, California.
By the way, Valley Center, California is where Ajahn is
That's where my
residing.
monastery is.
Okay, that's Metta Forest Monastery.
Okay.
Doctor has got a question. Can you pass the mic to Doctor over there? Yeah. You, behind. Sitting right.
Right there.
Number
Well,
two.
there's a lady right there. Right.
No,
right,
next to the-
right,
yes.
Right.
Bhante, I sense from your talk that you're asking us not to let go too easily.
Right.
So the point in which you want to let go obviously requires a lot of maybe wisdom at times. You were talking about the good doctor. The good doctor gives good advice to the patient, but the patient refuses to accept whatever the doctor feels is the right thing for the patient. So that gives rise to a lot of suffering if there is no acceptance on the part of the one giving the advice. So at some stage, he needs to let go.
Right.
And there are many, many instances of that.
Yeah.
And I think Bhante knows that amongst healthcare providers, there's a lot of suffering
Yes.
amongst the caregivers. Want to say something about that?
Well, just that is realizing that the cure is not going to be depending only on the doctor, but the cure will also depend on the patient, the patient's cooperation. And a good doctor tries to figure out how can I get the patient to go along with this. I mean, have you read any of the stories of Jivaka, the Buddhist physician in the Pali Canon? He was very clever in getting people to go along. And so that's going to be part of a doctor's psychology, is you really, try to get the patient to want to do this. But then you keep, it's not just doctors. Dharma teachers have problems with students, You tell the student, turn right, and they say, no, I'm going to go left. And then just to be ornery, you say, okay, go left. No, I'm going to go right. And there comes a point you say, okay, I'm doing this as my gift to the world. Now, whether this person accepts the advice now or maybe later on in life, who knows? But hopefully there will be some impact. But there comes a point where you have to realize, okay, this does require the cooperation of both sides. And if the patient does not cooperate, it's not your fault. And it's learning how to realize your limitations is an important part of equanimity. And an important part of learning how to be a good doctor. I have a student who is a psychotherapist, and she says one of the hardest lessons for being a therapist is realizing that you are not the therapist for that patient. Maybe somebody else is a therapist, but you're not. And once you can learn how to accept that, then it's a lot easier. Question here?
Pass the mic over, please.
Hi. Thank you, Ajahn. Actually, your talk is very enlightening because you give a different aspect of the word equanimity. To me, I thought that is the all and be all, Learning to be a Buddhist, you are equanimous, and you handle everything. It's like having a big shield around you, and nothing can hurt you because you are equanimous. And I was quite satisfied. That makes you get along with life pretty well, But today, you mentioned something about deafness. And that one is something that you say, like the elephant track, the footprint, all this are not real. It's like, okay, you're equanimous, but that's not the real thing.
Right.
So I haven't been getting the real thing, So I don't know whether I have got deafness. I don't think I can see that or even realize that I have it in this life. How do I know that I have it?
Okay, you have to work toward it. It's a goal. And equanimity is part of the path, but then there are other qualities you have to develop as well. If the Buddha could take it out and show you, say, here it is, deathless, he would have done that. But there's no way they can show it to you. But he promises, okay, when you follow the path, this is going to be the result that comes. So it's nothing you can see right in yourself right away, But so instead you focus on the path. It's like knowing, okay, this is the road that leads to Kuala Lumpur. Now you look at the road, you cannot see Kuala Lumpur, right? But you've got a map, and the map seems to be trustworthy. So, okay, I'll follow this road. And at some point, Kuala Lumpur will appear. Now, maybe Kuala Lumpur is not the best analogy for the deathless, but this is my limited knowledge of Malaysian geography. But in other words, you've got a path and you've got a map. And so this is what's going to go there. And so, but that's as far as that analogy takes you. There is a map, and it's going to say you have to turn left, you have to turn right. There are a lot of things you have to do. You cannot just say, I'm just going to be equanimous, I'm going to accept whatever comes up. Equanimity it's only one of the Brahma Viharas, it's only one of the factors for awakening. There are other factors of awakening. It's only one of the factors of jhana, there are other factors of jhana. So it plays a role, but it has to be played a role with a whole constellation of other factors as well. Yeah. So this is a little bit more demanding, but it's good. It gets a better result. You're shaking your head. First it goes up and down, and then it goes back and forth.
Looks like I have a lot to learn, but I don't know where to start.
Okay.
I mean, meditate only? Or, sometimes if you go to school, they have a syllabus, okay, this is what you have to do. But when you're in Buddhism, you are left all alone, okay, you do your meditation, and then you meditate. Well, I do get a lot of insight, practical insight, like of day-to-day life. But other than that, I don't feel myself getting more closer to deathlessness, I'm I don't know. I just feel like I'm like anybody else. I don't think I've, any nearer to being a Arahant or something. That is like, I don't know, like out of this world,
Yeah. Well, just tell yourself, okay, I want to cause myself less suffering. And you can see, okay, the suffering is getting less and less and less and less and less.
Yeah, because I'm more immune, like equanimous.
No, yeah. Okay,
So
well, okay, you've got that one down. Okay, now you've got the other things you've got to work on too. There's virtue, and there's concentration, and there's discernment. That's one list that you can follow. There's generosity, virtue, and meditation. There are lots of different lists you can follow. And don't look down on the basics.
Yeah, but it's very hard to measure, how far you have progressed, Sometimes it's like a bit wishy-washy. Sorry to say, but I don't know where I'm going, It's just like in a big sea. I'm swimming, but I don't know whether am I getting nearer or I'm just staying in the same place, basically,
Okay. The problem is that the Buddha's analogy is like you're using a hammer. And as you use the hammer every day, that the handle is getting worn down, but you can't see it diminishing. But if you come back and you look at it a year later, it did wear down. So try to take the long view. Okay.
There's a question here. Okay.
A question here.
Okay, come.
Good evening, Bhante. You mentioned that sankhara happens regardless of, just regardless. So the difference is that when you have sankhara with wisdom, you reduce suffering. Sankhara with ignorance, you create more sufferings. Okay, so when sankhara arises, the fabrications arises very quickly. So you often have a choice, either to use the sankhara to help or to cut the sankhara. So with what principle do you decide to cut or to help?
You look at, okay, if I follow through with this kind of fabrication, what are the results? And if this is a fabrication that's creating suffering, stop. And if it's someone that seems to be reducing the suffering, okay, continue with it. And then over time, you get more and more sensitive. And that's actually what the wisdom or the discernment is the sensitivity that you develop to what you're doing and the connection with the results that you're getting. So that's the basic rule of thumb. Okay, bye.
Bhante, where is our mind centered? And we would like to be the master of our own mind and not vice versa.
Mm-hmm. The mind can be centered anywhere. It's wherever you put your attention, that's where it's centered. So try to keep track of all the different places where it goes, and you'll find that it's all over the place. Now, the Buddha talks about something he calls the process of becoming, where you get focused on a particular desire, and then you start building an identity around that desire, and then there's going to be a world that also forms around that desire. And the combination of the identity and that world, okay, that will be the state of becoming. And those can be centered in many, many places. Like after the talk tonight, you can think about, oh God, here I am in Singapore, food heaven. Where am I going to go eat tonight? Okay, then your stomach becomes a big part of you at that point, and your taste buds, and also your wallet that can buy the food. Okay, at that point, okay, then your mind is centered on those things. And then after you've been well fed, then you start thinking about something else that you'd like. Okay, then you can get centered on that as well. Now, I didn't hear the last half of your question. I just heard the first half. You asked about where the mind is centered, but then you had a second half to the question.
It's just not what you explained. We are not going to let the mind, disobeys us what we want to do and all this.
Mm-hmm.
How to make the mind more obedient.
More obedient? Okay. It's like making a dog more obedient. Sometimes you're harsh and sometimes you're gentle and kind. If you're nothing but harsh, it's not going to cooperate. And if you simply follow it, okay, then it's not going to get trained. So you have to learn how to read your mind. Okay, when are the times to be harsh? When are the times to be gentle?
Ajahn Kat, there's a question here.
I have a specific question. I consider Buddhist practice as a diligent practice for my own. However, today we live in a society where also an intellectual part of Buddhism arises. Like Ajahn, you write books, and many other monks also write books. And sometimes if discussing this outside of my practice, I get affected by the philosophical part. I'm not calling it philosophical. I would like to call it the intellectual part. Am I doing wrong? Am I doing wrong if I am more focusing also sometimes in this intellectual part in reason when it comes to the in terms if it comes to a discussion and I want to falsify or verify something in with someone else? Am I doing wrong to my Buddhist practice?
No. There are going to be times when you need to come to an understanding of what you're doing, and it's going to require reading. Sometimes. And there are other times when you say, okay, I've read enough, put the books aside, all I have to do now is practice. It's not, there's a rhythm. There are times when it's useful to get into the intellectual side, as long as the intellectual side is helping your practice. When it starts getting carried away into other issues that are getting further and further away from your practice, and maybe this is not right for me. I mean, there's some Dharma books that are extremely theoretical that have very little to do with your practice, and you say, I don't need those. But there are books that explain the path, explain the wings to awakening, explain the process of becoming. In other words, things that are actually happening in your mind. And those are things you really want to know.
But should I be affected if I see some issues arise in this philosophical ground from also other lay persons, and I cannot take it if I see it's a misconception or some wrong thought? Should I be affected by it, or how should I deal with it?
Okay, you try to see, is this somebody I can talk to? Will this person listen to me? I mean, you try.
I talk to everyone, of course, yes.
And then you say, some people are not responding, you say, okay, enough, that's enough of that discussion. You can't straighten out the whole world.
No, I mean, I'm not saying I'm right. I mean, I'm also, I'm like everyone here, so I do a lot of mistakes. I have not yet found here, also in Thailand, some monks say this world is very intellectual. I know some Thai monks are saying, the Europeans should go back to Europe and teach. They are not in Thailand anymore. So it's, very high-ranked monks also. And
don't listen to the high-ranking monks.
Yeah, they are. By the Thai, they are considered. They even have.
I know. My older brother's term for those with the high monkey monks.
Just telling you about these clashes of cultures, and it's sometimes I'm really having hardship with it. So it's just all I want to say. Yeah.
With some people, you just say, okay, I just don't have to listen to this person. There's nothing I can pick up from them. We live in a world with lots of people with lots of opinions. And if you get yourself worked up, it's like the hungry ghost in the sala. Do you know the story of the hungry ghost in the sala? Yeah, okay. There's a hungry ghost that lived up in the rafters of the sala. And there was a group of people who came to do a katina. And so they were sleeping in the sala and they were all lined up. And the hungry ghost noticed that their heads were not in line. So he goes down, he pulls their heads, so they get in line. And then he looks up, their feet are not in line. So he goes down and pulls their feet, and their feet are in line. Then he comes, their heads are not in line anymore. All night long. So that's the kind of, you don't become that kind of person, okay? Right, yeah. Okay. Anything else? More in the back. Okay, go ahead.
Ajahn, all of us have different karma, different parami, and we work towards better parami in this lifetime. This is something new I learned, Attaha. The first time I met you, you talk about the banana, make sure we keep the skin first as we travel to the path to the goal. At this point, as a lay person, most of us are lay people, what would Ajahn recommend the purpose, the meaning, while we work towards our parami?
Okay. Okay, the paramis, in fact, that's the topic of tomorrow's talk. and I can guarantee she's not a plant, okay? Okay. You know that this is your goal, and this is the way to get to the goal, so you focus on the way. In other words, as I said, suppose you know that there's this road that goes to a mountain. You can see the mountain on the horizon, and you know this is the road that goes there. Now, if you spend all your time looking at the mountain, you go off the road. So you say, look, I've got to focus on my next step. What are the qualities? You look at the different bardamis. Which one am I lacking? Work on that. What are my strengths? So you can build on your strengths. And sort of, instead of trying to aim all the way at the end, so I'm going to slice this job down into smaller jobs so it becomes more and more manageable. And you work on what you can, step by step by step by step. Because otherwise, you live in this world, and if you take anything else as your goal, it's going to be destroyed. Like You suppose you decide, okay, I want to work in the government and I want to do a really good job in the government. And then the government changes and they throw out what you did. And this is what happened to my father. And so if you're measuring your success in terms of things outside, that's dependent on other people. Whereas if you measure your success in terms of the good qualities you can develop in your heart, okay, that's something that's totally within your control. So focus on that.
Other questions? Anyone else?
Good evening, Brother Ajahn.
Oh.
Hi, good evening. How do we discern between the process of letting go and the process of giving up? Because as you can see, Buddhist practitioners are very much alone. And mind training is very much a lonely affair.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to fall into a nihilistic approaches of it without being aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
What should we do to check this against such?
I mean, this is why they have teachers. Try to find a teacher, somebody you respect and somebody you trust. And if you can't find somebody you trust, you say, look, I've got to make myself more trustworthy. In which case, always try to err on the side of doing too much, pushing yourself a little bit too hard. And then when you realize, okay, this is too hard, then you back up. Because otherwise you say, well, I'll take the easy route. It just gets more and more, I'm thinking in Thai, that was a good English word, everything just kind of dissolves. And if you decide, I'm running up against a brick wall in one area, say, well, what other part of my practice can I work on? Maybe if I develop strengths in one other side, then I come back and deal with this problem. That's how you guarantee against giving up. You say, well, I'll just let go of this for the time being as I work on something else, and then I'll come back.
Anyone else? The other side? No? Okay. Otherwise, one here and then one there.
One back, okay. And one over there.
I have a question regarding a previous one you were saying about using the body, mentally, and verbal to deal with kilesas. Can you elaborate more on how to use these three and when should we use it appropriately?
Okay, you can use all three.
Sorry?
Use all three.
When should we use it?
Okay, I'm going to tell you. Suppose you're angry. Okay, first thing you look at is, how am I breathing? How is my body? Can I relax my body? Can I breathe more calmly? That helps you think more clearly. And then you ask yourself, what am I telling myself about this other person that I'm angry about? Can I change the commentary in my mind? And then also look at what kind of images am I holding in my mind, what kind of perceptions. Do I see this person as a monster? Do I see this person as a snake? What's the image that you hold in mind? Can I change the image? And one of the images that you might have in mind is that it doesn't matter that I'm angry at this person, and it's basically your image is that you are a judge, you're sitting way up on a desk, way up on a judge's seat, and that other person is way down there, and whatever you decide about that person has no effect on you, so you can just dismiss the person. And the Buddha says, hold in mind a different perception, which is that you're coming across a desert, your heart hot, trembling with thirst. You need water. You find a little bit of water in the footprint of a cow. And you realize if you scooped up the water, you would make it muddy. So what do you have to do? You have to get down and slurp it up. Now that's not a very dignified position. You wouldn't want anyone coming along and taking an Instagram at that point. But you need the water. You say, I don't care. In the same way, you try to look for the good points of that person you're angry at, even though you feel that it's beneath your dignity. Still look, I need that person's water. because otherwise my heart is going to get very dry and I'm going to get more and more harsh. But if I can see the goodness in other people, then it's going to be easier to be good to them. Otherwise, you're like the... There was a cartoon in the magazine New Yorker. I don't know if you know... Do you know the New Yorker in Singapore? No. They have very good cartoons. And one of the cartoons that had two female dogs at a bar. And you know they're female dogs because they had lipstick and mascara. And they both have very mean looks on their faces. And one of them was saying, "They're all sons of bitches." Which, of course, the message is, if everybody else is a son of a bitch, what does that make you? You know. So if all you can see is the bad points in other people, you're going to become a bad person yourself. So if you can think about their good points, okay, then you're going to become a better person. You hold that image in mind, and that makes it a lot easier to overcome your anger. So that's using bodily fabrication, verbal fabrication, and mental fabrication. Question back there.
Okay, Chan, and then next one, the other side.
So, just now Ajahn talked about the bull and female elephant. So I want to ask a question on the Buddhist elephant. It's about the elephant and the seven blind men. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I'm suggesting is it possible that each of these blind men represents a different faith in this religion, in this world? Each blind man represents a faith. Maybe the Buddhist blind men might have a bit of eye open and can see a bit more, but they actually, all the faith are feeling the same elephant.
Buddhists by definition are not blind.
No, so I'm just using an analogy. So when all of them open their eyes, they're actually seeing the same elephant, but because they're all blind, they're only seeing one part of the elephant, and each faith is describing the elephant in a way that is quite different, but in actual fact, they are the same. So is it possible that all the faiths in the world are actually looking at the same elephant?
They're asking different questions. I mean, some of the faiths say, okay, what is the nature of the universe? What is my identity? And it's a different question. The Buddhist question is, why am I suffering? Can I stop? Which is not a question that the other religions ask, or they don't focus on it in the same way. So even though that maybe the world is a big elephant, still the different religions are asking different questions. And they're going to be getting something different out of it. So the question is, okay, which are the most useful questions to ask? Yes.
Good evening, Ajahn. I just wanted to ask you, with regards to the way one lets go in meditation without being a negative approach, when it can be used as a positive support, especially with the rising of kilesas. Often it happens when you have a certain amount of stillness and thoughts arise, and one can watch it. How does one actually let it go? Especially those ones which are not wholesome. So initially one would say to oneself, let it go, by having observed its unwholesome nature. So from that perspective, would you say letting go itself with an awareness is actually a positive approach?
It helps sometimes, but there are other times when it's not going to help. And with each case, the Buddha says there are two things you have to look for. One is, what is the allure? Why do you like that kilesa? And then the second is, what are the drawbacks? Now, the hardest thing to see is going to be the allure. Because often we like anger, we like greed, we like lust, for reasons that we don't admit to ourselves. And until you can learn to admit it, you can't see, well, this is why I go for it, and then you can't compare it with the drawbacks. When you actually see the genuine allure, this is why I like that, and you say, oh my gosh, this is horrible. That's when you can let go. So sometimes you can't see why you like it, but it's okay, you watch it for a while, Say, I'm not going to give in, but I'm just going to watch this. It's going to come and go and come and go. And that's an important thing to see, is that it's not constantly there. When it goes, then you pick it up again. Okay, why did you pick it up? What reasoning? And the mind will have many layers of reasoning, and you're going to have to dig down through those layers until you really let go. And basically what the point of letting go comes, it's not when you tell yourself to let go, it's when you say, oh, this is so stupid, I don't know why I'm holding on. This is why when people gain awakening, there's no pride that comes with the awakening, because they will realize how stupid they were. So, okay. Anything else?
No.
Yes.
One more here.
Ajahn, my question is, you said that the paramis, developing paramis, are like useful for us when we are trying to like navigate to the end goal.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you mean? And they are like useful landmarks, right, for us to get there.
Right.
So while developing the paramis, how would you know that you're really developing it, or if you're fooling yourself?
Again, this is something you're going to learn how to read yourself over time, get more sensitive to, okay, where am I weak in the paramis, and which one needs more work? Come to tomorrow night's talk.
Okay, there's one.
Dear Bhante, my question is somewhat related to the previous question about mind being centered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you said it is like centered wherever you think about something, it's centered there.
Mm-hmm.
But I was taught that the seat of the mind is at the heart, and I experienced that if you try to calm yourself down, it is or meditate, it goes there and then it comes. Then you try to bring it back, it goes there, then you try to bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my actual question. My actual question is that some of us have very active minds, as in they go all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to a psychiatrist, they'll say you have a problem, you have ADHD, you're too distracted. But is there a skillful means or a separate path for such people with very active minds, other than you go to a teacher and then he says, oh, you just need to do more meditation, you just need to sit more?
Okay, well, some forms of meditation require a lot of thinking. Like contemplation of the Buddha, contemplation of the Dharma and the Sangha, contemplation of death. These things will require thinking, so if the mind is active in thinking, it's okay, give it one of the topics that requires thinking. And then, but think in such a way that comes to the conclusion, the mind really needs to calm down. Like you're thinking about the Buddha, what were the virtues of the Buddha, why you feel inspired by the Buddha, what a good example he sets. Okay, how would you apply his example to you at the moment? And eventually, if you follow that correctly, it calms you down. So that's one tactic. In other words, you're trying to develop your discernment and then use your discernment to get the mind to come to stillness.
Sorry, if I understand you correctly, that means that you don't start with normal formal sitting meditation, you start on one of the contemplations.
Okay, you sit, but you do the contemplations.
Huh?
You sit still, but you do the contemplations.
Oh, okay. Sit still and do the contemplations.
Okay, and if you can't sit still, do walking meditation and do the contemplations.
Okay. At what point do you change to another method?
When you get tired.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay.
Any more? Okay.
Just a check on the reference.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned to check on the book
Buddhist romanticism.
Okay, Buddhist.
Buddhist romanticism.
Who is the author? I found the audio recording, but not the book.
No, we do have. I stand corrected, but please check with Keith, our administrator. A few years ago, I printed copies of them. We may still have some of them here.
You printed Buddhist romanticism?
I think I did. Not very sure. I think I did. I'm not very sure.
You can get it at dhammatalks.org.
Yeah.
I have it on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's an awfully small format.
Only the audio version.
No, it's a book.
There's no audio version.
No, it's a book.
It's a book. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Anyone else with a question? Yeah, there's one behind you and then one at the pillar.
Good evening, Bhante. Just want to ask about breath meditation. It seems like for me, the breath meditation, the very act of doing the breath meditation, there's a process of like a fabrication. So just observing the breath itself, there is an element of shaping the breath. So from my understanding, is sankhara, is a body fabrication. So is it true that maybe the arahats, when they touch the deathless, they breathe differently, or they breathe in a very different way?
At that point, they're not aware of their breath at all. I mean, there's no sense of the body in the deathless.
But after they come out...
After they come out, they breathe like normal people. Yeah. Question over here.
Okay, one at the pillar next to Chan.
Yeah, good evening, Ajahn. Actually, I'm asking for the sake of my daughter. So I have two questions, but they are related. So the first one is, if I want to study to be a doctor, but during the course I need to harm animals, like dissect live animals, should I just forget about it?
Dissect live animals?
Yeah, it's part of the course. That means dissect them live, so you cause them suffering. To be a doctor, otherwise you cannot pass the course, or you're going to lose marks. So should I just forget about it? Then the second question is related. If I become a lawyer and I'm assigned to defend someone I know is a criminal, but I know if I defend him well, he'll get off scot-free. So I purposely lose the case. I'm actually asking for the sake of my daughter.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Never intentionally lose a case, okay? Even for the criminal, you try to give the criminal as much justice as possible.
Let's say you have privileged information.
Okay, I would say give the criminal another chance.
Oh, sorry, what if the criminal, you somehow know, hypothetically, you know he really did it and it was a really horrible crime.
Then you just say, I'm not going to take the case.
But what if your boss forces you? Because you are the top lawyer in the firm.
Okay.
You have no choice.
Okay, you say, okay, I'll try to give this person as much justice as possible.
I see.
As for the doctor, what did it say? Dedicate a lot of merit to the horse.
Okay. Because I think they use mice or guinea pigs.
Mice?
Yeah.
Oh, mice, okay.
Or
Dedicate a
hamsters
lot
or
of merit
something.
to the mice.
Yeah. So dedicate merit as you do the dissection or whatever it is. Because I checked with a doctor friend, he said that's what they do. They actually behead the animal to do some kind of test on it.
They behead?
Live.
They
Yeah, they
behead?
behead the animal.
Behead the
But
animal.
during his time, there was no ethics board. Now there is an ethics board, but they will still go through the ethics board, but they still have this kind of thing. They may have this kind. So I was wondering, because it's going to be accumulate so bad karma, then I rather my daughter don't try this kind of course.
Okay, well,
Yeah, that's why I need to ask. Yeah.
tell your daughter if she's going to do something like that, she better be a really good doctor.
But you can dedicate merit.
But I don't know. It's one of the reasons why I'm not a doctor.
Okay, thanks. Then for the lawyer one, basically just do your best in your job. That's it. Okay.
Now, when I was young, my father lost his farm. And for a year, he didn't have a job, and so there was no meat on the table. And so he came up with the idea that we should raise rabbits, my older brother and me. And I was too young to understand why we were raising the rabbits. We had this 2 cute rabbits in a big cage up in the barn. And of course, then there lots of baby rabbits came. And so one day we went up to feed the rabbits, and one of the rabbits was missing. But it had closed the door to the cage behind it. And so we asked my grandfather, he said he didn't see it. We asked my father, he hadn't seen it. And when we went home for dinner that night, my mother said, we're having chicken for dinner tonight. And if my mother had been smart, she would have made rabbit stew, and we never would have known. But she roasted the rabbit. And I was old enough to count. And it didn't have 2 legs, it had 4 legs. And I finally realized, 1, that they had killed our rabbit, and 2, my mother lied to me. I was beside myself. I refused to eat it. So that's why I'm not a doctor. So, okay, thank you for your attention.